There's no place like summer camp. Where else can you experience the beauty of nature and the horror of sharing one bathroom with 10 kids? The joy of telling scary stories around the fire, and the fear that the tales you hear are true. Growing up, camp taught me camaraderie and discipline. As a dad, I wanted to pass those lessons on to my kids, whose teen angst was causing some family friction. That's how I found myself on a tour of Camp Harmony in Cumberland, Rhode Island. Every kid seemed happy, successful, and obedient. They hit their archery targets, canoed like Olympians, and sang songs in perfect harmony. They did it all under the watchful eye of the camp director, Shannon, a magnetic blonde in her 40s with piercing eyes and scars running up her arms, neck, and face. She radiated power and made the kids want to be their best selves. Well, most of them. After the tour, I took a walk in the woods and came upon a counselor smoking a blunt. The poor guy panicked and stubbed it out. He told me it was his day off and he'd never interact with the kids like this. So could I please not rat on him? I had to laugh. Shannon has you on a tight leash, huh? He nodded. Yeah, she made it through the summer of '92, so nobody messes with her. I asked, what happened in '92? With a grave expression, he whispered, the Camp Harmony Massacre. You're listening to Run, Fool! I'm Rodney Barnes, and this is episode 32, Fingernails, Freddie. A beat-up Jeep rumbled past the lake headed for Camp Harmony. Two 16-year-old girls rode inside, Shannon and Winnie. They were cousins who shared a slim build, ash blonde hair, and clever eyes. When they were kids, everyone thought they were twins, but teenhood had driven them in wildly opposite styles. In the driver's seat, Winnie squinted through dark eyeliner. She turned up the radio to jam to the new band she loved, Nirvana. Then she lifted a Zippo lighter to the cigarette hanging from her lips. She tried lighting it, but her sharp purple nails gave her trouble. Going grunge had its downsides. Shannon reached over, but not to help. She plucked the cig away and flicked it out the window. Then, she fluffed her perm and tuned the radio to her obsession, Celine Dion. Winnie scoffed. If this is what they listened to at camp, she was going to have to convert them to the dark side. Shannon frowned and begged her not to rock the boat. Shannon had gone to camp for years, and now she was a counselor. Winnie was about to be one too, though she had no camp experience, unless you count watching all the Friday the 13th movies. But an art counselor had dropped out right around the time Winnie got in trouble for fighting, and smoking pot, and light arson. Her dad said she needed discipline, so she asked Shannon to pull some strings. Now, the cousins were reunited. Winnie told Shannon she was psyched for a summer together, like the old days, before Shannon started going to camp. Shannon gave her a tight smile. We'll hang for sure, but I have a life here too, you know? Winnie wanted to ask her what she meant, but something made her stop the car. A big old cabin right at the lakeshore. The wood was charred black, the roof was caved in, and cobwebs coated the jagged glass in the windows. Winnie's eyes gleamed. If this was Camp Harmony, she was obsessed. It looked like a horror flick. Shannon shivered and said no. That cabin was off limits. It belonged to some kook who died in a fire in the 60s. Rumor had it that campers started the blaze, and now the man's ghost haunted the cabin. But that was just a silly story. Now, could Winnie get a move on? Camp was still a half-mile away. Winnie snuck a last glance at the cabin, then drove off. The girls parked outside the Camp Harmony Lodge where kids in pastel polos with crest-white smiles hugged and high-fived. Winnie had to admit, the fresh air was nice, maybe even worth being trapped in a J. Crew catalog all summer. Then she heard a scream. A girl with wild red curls attacked Shannon with a hug. She was dressed just like Shannon, and Winnie wondered who was copying who. They squealed like a pair of perky piglets. Winnie backed away from the noise and was knocked over by someone running past. A muscular guy in a neon tracksuit with a bow and arrow strapped to his back. He scooped Shannon up and kissed her with way too much tongue. As Winnie pulled herself up, she felt a surge of jealousy? Possessiveness? She wasn't sure. Almost as an afterthought, Shannon told Winnie this was Courtney and Todd. Todd stared at her blankly while Courtney eyed the skull tattoo on Winnie's wrist. She backed away, like she was afraid grunge was contagious. Winnie gave them a shy wave, then turned to her Jeep to get the bags. She asked Shannon for help, but Todd carried her off, Courtney in tow. Shannon shouted to take her stuff to bunk 2. She'd see her later. That night, everyone gathered for a raucous welcome dinner. Holding a tray of sloppy joes, Winnie made her way to Shannon, Courtney, and Todd's table. Even the young campers sitting there seemed to be the most popular of the bunch. Winnie tried to squeeze in next to Shannon, but Courtney stopped her. "I actually assigned you to table 6. It's more your scene, Winifred." Winnie hated her tragically dorky full name, Winifred. She wanted to correct Courtney with a punch to the mouth, but Shannon didn't want her to rock the boat. So Winnie walked off, trying to ignore how relieved Shannon looked. Table 6 was in a dark corner, and the kids there were surly art freaks, which, to be fair, was her scene. On the upside, a cute counselor sat there too, Chase. He wore a dangly earring and a paint-stained bowling shirt, and smelled faintly of weed. Definitely Winnie's type. He pointed at Shannon's table. "You dodged a bullet. Todd's only got 2 modes, court jester or roid rage. And Courtney's a Barbie possessed by Satan. She hogs the bathroom every day at dawn to do her hair. Oh, and Shannon? She and I were a thing back in the day, but now?" Winnie cut him off. "Watch it. She's my cousin." Chase squinted between her and Shannon, eyes widening as he saw the similarities. Across the room, Shannon caught him staring and gave him a strange look. Chase turned away. "I was gonna say Shannon has a good heart, but she shares it with the wrong people." Soon, Winnie saw how right he was. She heard a kid whimper and saw Todd and Courtney in action. Todd towered above a chubby boy and held up a bowl of chocolate ice cream. He berated him for skipping his veggies and hogging dessert. Meanwhile, Courtney force-fed the kid broccoli. Winnie couldn't stop herself. She stormed over to grab Courtney's elbow and asked what the hell was wrong with her. But Courtney pulled back, and Winnie's sharp nails raked across her arm. Blood welled from the cuts, and Courtney screamed. The room went quiet and Shannon ran over. Winnie thought she'd help, but Courtney pushed her away and hissed that she was being a psycho. Winnie stumbled into Todd, who cackled like a hyena in her ear, and dumped the ice cream over Winnie's head. It oozed into her hair and down her back. Courtney's tears dried instantly, and she burst out laughing. People will do anything a pretty girl tells them, especially if they're scared of her. So when Courtney looked around, the whole camp exploded in giggles, even Shannon. Winnie ran out. Winnie raced through the woods. She kept looking back, hoping Shannon would follow. Her eyes weren't on the path, so she tripped over a branch. When she got up, she saw she'd run all the way to the old cabin, the one Shannon said was haunted. She thought it'd be the perfect place to sulk, when something whispered from within it.
Winnie.
Maybe it was just the wind playing tricks, but Winnie had to know for sure. So she stepped into the pitch-black cabin. The floor creaked and crumbled. She'd worried if she'd fall through the woods, so she fumbled for her lighter. She flicked it on, but the darkness was too thick for the flame to penetrate. She called out, "Hello?" A breeze, no, a breath, blew her light out. She heard the whisper again.
Winnie, campers and flames aren't my favorite combination. That's what killed me.
Winnie remembered Shannon's tale about the old man who was burned alive by the campers' fire, but she was skeptical. She asked if this was a joke, and the darkness shifted around her like a living thing.
Maybe I've watched the camp for decades, silent and unseen, and I've learned that kids think the strangest things are funny, like burning down cabins or humiliating their own cousins. Tell me, is that a joke?
Winnie seethed. It wasn't. The whisper chuckled and said that it was time to make Shannon pay. Alarmed, Winnie said it wasn't Shannon's fault. It was Todd and Courtney's. Shannon wouldn't be like this if they hadn't ruined her. The whisper insisted.
So, let's set Shannon free.
Winnie frowned. Why do you want to help me? I'm nobody. The whisper sighed.
As am I. My body was charred to a crisp, and my soul hangs in the air like smoke from a dying campfire. I need you to give me shape, form, grasp.
Winnie asked what to do. The whisper told her to close her eyes and picture the scariest things she could think of. Winnie conjured up images of her favorite horror icons: Jason Voorhees, Freddie Krueger, and Michael Myers, chopping up teens who deserved it. Then came darker flashes: the chill of ice cream on her back, campers' crazed grins as they laughed at her. How good it felt to scrape Courtney with her nails. Winnie heard footsteps and opened her eyes. Now, someone really was there. She lit up her Zippo. Her terrible creation stepped into the flickering light, and Winnie smiled. Time for some fun.
Why do 80% of coffee drinkers love Java Burn? It's because it makes weight loss so effortless. Java Burn is a game changer for anyone looking to boost their metabolism and shed those extra pounds. Just add this tasteless, 100% natural blend to your morning coffee and let it work its magic. With powerful ingredients like green tea extract, L-theanine, and chromium, Java Burn helps you burn fat faster and feel more energetic throughout the day. No extra effort needed. The best part? It dissolves instantly, so you can keep enjoying your favorite brew without any changes. Whether you want to lose weight or just feel more energized, Java Burn is here to help. And guess what? You can try it risk-free. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description and give Java Burn a try today. Feel the difference for yourself. Remember, the link is in the description. Try Java Burn now and transform your coffee and your life.
Winnie headed back to camp. She walked alone in the woods, but her footsteps felt heavier, like a presence walked with her. She heard a noise, then a hyena-like cackle, one she recognized. She came upon the archery range. On a platform over the lake, Todd stumbled around on his own, shirtless, sweaty, clad in ridiculous neon blue shorts. He swigged from a whiskey bottle, then picked up his bow and arrow. Facing a target, he drew the bow back. Winnie called his name and Todd yelped. His arrow shot out, missing the target and landing in the lake. He turned, furious, as Winnie walked up. Todd sniffed the air. Ew, did you not shower after the ice cream thing? He looked disgusted, but it didn't stop him from putting a hand around her waist. Winnie felt his hot, boozy breath graze her neck as he slurred. If she wasn't so weird, she'd be as hot as Shannon. Winnie glowered. If he was with Shannon, he shouldn't flirt with other people. Todd gritted his teeth. That doesn't stop her. So what do you want? Winnie grabbed his whiskey and took a swig and batted her eyes. Teach me how to shoot? Todd couldn't resist the ego stroke. He handed her a bow, went to the target at the end of the platform, and told her to shoot. Winnie pulled the arrow back and let it fly. It hit the target, dead center. Todd's jaw dropped. He pulled the arrow out and then asked why she looked so bummed. Winnie sighed. I missed. Before a confused Todd could tell her she hadn't, Winnie turned to the woods. He won't miss, though. Then Winnie's creation stepped out of the dark. He loomed, with the bulk of Jason Voorhees, the stillness of Michael Myers, and the scarred skin of Freddy Krueger. He was like every slasher villain combined, but he also bore traces of Winnie. A matted mane of hair, dark clothes, piercing eyes, and sprouting from one hand were long, purple, razor-sharp nails. Winnie grinned at this twisted funhouse mirror vision of herself. For now, she'd call him Fingernails Freddie. Todd gawked in terror. Winnie handed her monster the bow, then realized she had no arrows. She panicked until the killer ripped one of his long nails out. In a flash, he strung it into the bow and shot it at Todd. The nail flew through the air and stabbed Todd's crotch, pinning him to the target. He looked down, watching blood spurt from the wound, turning his blue shorts red. He just started screaming when the target board creaked back and fell into the lake, drowning Todd's cries and dragging him into the depths. Winnie nodded at Fingernails Freddie, thankful. One down. At dawn, Winnie stalked across the misty campground. Chase said Courtney spent the early hours primping in the bathroom by the lake, so that's where she had to go. In the bathroom, Courtney danced to the pop tune blasting from her radio, tossing her crimson curls and luxuriating in her own perfection. She stopped to look at her reflection. Her hair was seriously lacking volume. She grabbed a big can of hairspray, shaking it. She looked back in the mirror and saw Winnie behind her. Courtney choked back a scream. She didn't want to give Winnie the satisfaction, so she played it cool and sprayed her hair. "You're here to say you're sorry for mauling me?" Winnie looked at the bandage on her arm. That was an accident. Courtney rolled her eyes. Whatever. Winnie smiled. But this is on purpose. The door burst open. Fingernails Freddie strode in. "Now," Courtney screamed. She tried to run past him, but he dug his claws into her curls. He dragged her by her hair back to the mirror, then grabbed her hairspray. Courtney begged for help, but Winnie just laughed. She pulled out her lighter, then brought it up to the spray can. She flicked it on as the killer pressed the nozzle. Hairspray shot through the flame, creating a jet of fire that lit Courtney's head ablaze. Freddie held her in front of the mirror, forcing Courtney to watch her beautiful face sizzle, blister, and melt off her skull. Winnie didn't want to burn the place down, so she ordered him to put out the fire. He tossed Courtney in the shower. Winnie thought he'd turn on the water, but no. He stomped on Courtney's head, over and over, until all that was left was bone and ash. A few hours later at lunch, Winnie peered into the dining hall to spy on Shannon. She sat at the cool kids' table alone and upset. Winnie walked over, feeling a twinge of guilt. It vanished when Shannon scooched over and asked her to sit. Shannon told her Todd and Courtney were gone. She thought maybe they'd snuck off. Winnie tried to look worried and asked, would they really ditch her like that? Shannon was about to answer when Chase came up to ask Shannon if she was okay. He'd heard about Todd and Courtney being MIA. Winnie bristled. Chase hated the cool kids, so why was he so eager to comfort Shannon? Winnie snapped. This is a private chat, okay? A hurt Chase squeezed Shannon's shoulder and shuffled off. Winnie grabbed her cousin's hand. She told her she'd blow off the art class she was teaching and hang with her all day. That's what family was for. Shannon winced and told her that actually keeping busy would be good for her, so she volunteered to lead the sunset swim. But she did need a favor. Could she borrow Winnie's Jeep after the swim? Todd's family had a lake house nearby, and she wanted to see if he and Courtney were holed up there. Winnie was stunned. Shannon thought her friends had abandoned her and she still wanted to chase them? Clearly, Winnie's next move had to be less subtle. There's a tradition at Camp Harmony called the Sunset Swim. At the end of the first full day, everyone jumps into the lake to kick off a summer of fun and togetherness. This year's swim started joyfully. Shannon led a gang of kids into the water, splashing and singing the camp song. She almost forgot about Todd and Courtney, until a little girl pointed across the lake and asked about the boats. Shannon saw 2 canoes float into the swim area. She laughed and paddled over. Was this a prank? Her smile faded when she saw what was in the canoes. One held Todd's bloated, waterlogged body. In the other was a headless Courtney. Those little campers would never forget the sound of Shannon's screams. Night fell, and Camp Harmony descended into chaos. It wasn't just the 2 dead bodies. Dozens of kids had been injured in the rush to get out of the lake, and the cops still weren't there. Winnie floated through the den like a ghost. Nobody noticed her, which was fine. Her canoe stunt had gone exactly as planned. Everyone was busy, and Shannon had been sent to rest in Cabin 13, an isolated room tucked in a peaceful grove. Winnie was headed there to tell her she didn't have to mourn alone. But as she peered through a window into the dim room, she saw Shannon wasn't alone. Chase sat with Shannon on a cot, hugging her. Then he stood and picked up a bottle of rubbing alcohol. He told her he had to get back. Kids need their cuts disinfected, but he didn't want her there all alone. Should he go get Winnie? Shannon shuddered. No. She means well, but she creeps me out. She's always been obsessed with me. Chase admitted, me too, you know. Shannon smiled sadly. She knew, but the difference was, she wanted Chase there. She pulled Chase down to the cot and kissed him. He dropped the rubbing alcohol and embraced her. Winnie watched, fury flooding her veins. Her work wasn't done yet. In Cabin 13, Shannon and Chase got hot and heavy. It was less passionate and more desperate. She just wanted to feel something that wasn't terror. She pulled off her Camp Harmony polo and tossed it on the table. But as Chase unbuttoned his pants, Shannon shot up. Did you hear that? Footsteps? He looked around. It was dark, and he may have heard a creak, but that wouldn't help Shannon's nerves. No, it's just the wind. He went back to kiss her, but the moment was over. Shannon asked, could he just hold her? Chase nodded. She smiled and asked for her shirt. Chase reached over the table and fumbled for it. Where the hell did it go? He got his answer when a figure lunged out of the darkness, whipped the polo around his neck, and pulled it tight. Shannon screamed as Chase turned crimson. She clawed at the shirt, lifting it an inch away from his throat. He got a gasp of air, but it was too late. Freddie's razor-sharp nails stabbed through Chase's back and came out of his chest, spraying Shannon's face with his blood. But Chase's last breath wasn't a useless one, because he choked out a final word. Window. The killer flung Chase aside while Shannon whipped her head to the window. She saw a thrilled Winnie watching. Shannon saw Freddie look at Winnie too, like he was waiting for orders. She scrambled out of bed and ran for the door. As Winnie rushed in, Shannon backed into the cabin and realized the killer was gone. She let out a sob, worried she was losing her mind. Winnie cooed, saying she'd come to save her. Shannon shook her head. No, you were watching like this is a horror movie. I know you're behind this, you freak. Winnie's face darkened, and Shannon pushed past her to open the door. Bad move. Freddie stood outside. He slashed his claws across Shannon's arms and chest. She staggered, clutching at the gashes in her perfect skin. She turned to Winnie, who glared at her with rage. There was no way out. Suddenly a change came over Shannon. Winnie gulped. She knew the look from slasher movies. It was the face the final girl made when she stopped screaming and started fighting back. Shannon pounced on Winnie, They landed on the bottle of rubbing alcohol that Chase dropped and it burst open. Fumes filled the room and alcohol splashed into Shannon's wounds. The pain just made her stronger. She throttled her cousin and Winnie's eyes shut to the door. She needed Freddie's help, but he was gone. Winnie begged her to stop. She just wanted to be her friend. Shannon screamed, "No, Winnie, you want to be me." Winnie realized maybe Shannon was right. Maybe that's what led her so terribly astray. She started to choke out an apology, but Shannon spat blood on her face. "Screw you. No matter what you do, you'll never be me." Winnie looked down at Shannon's wounds gushing blood. She wasn't going to make it through the night. Winnie smiled. Well, someone's got to be. Winnie dug into her pocket. She pulled out her lighter, lit it for the last time, and threw it at the puddle of alcohol. It went up in flames. Winnie pulled Shannon close. It was like looking in a funhouse mirror, and she finally felt the connection she craved. She kissed Shannon's cheek. "Goodbye, Winnie." Before Shannon could ask what the hell that meant, the cabin blew up. When they saw the tower of smoke, the whole camp raced to cabin 13. It burned like hell itself, and they wept at the idea that Shannon had perished. But then the door blew off its hinges, and a girl stumbled out. Her hair was smoldering. Her torn camp polo revealed sizzling burns across her body. She looked half-cooked, but her eyes were as piercing as ever. It was Shannon. She rasped. Winnie was the killer, but her cousin was dead now, and Shannon was okay. She collapsed. People rushed to help. They didn't bother to check for survivors in the cabin. The roof had caved in, and nobody could live through that. They loaded their beloved Shannon onto a stretcher, praying for her recovery. Her eyes were closed so they didn't see the eyeliner that ringed her lids. Her hands were stained with soot so they didn't notice the purple polish on her nails. And her wrist was burned, so nobody made out the warped remnants of a skull tattoo. If Shannon didn't quite look like herself, it made sense. She'd been through hell, and Camp Harmony was just happy she was alive. So happy, they never realized that the girl who crawled out of the inferno wasn't really Shannon. When the counselor finished his nasty bit of camp lore, I wanted to tell him he'd smoked too much weed. But then I heard footsteps. The bushes rustled, and Shannon emerged. Only according to the counselor, the camp director wasn't really Shannon. It was Winnie, who'd taken over her cousin's life. I know I looked panicked, but she just gave me a strange smile and asked if I enjoyed my tour. Like a kid, I said, "Yes, ma'am." She turned to the counselor, eyeing the joint by his feet. "I know it's your day off, but why don't you get back to camp? Nobody likes a loner." The kid hesitated until he heard a crunch in the trees. He looked behind Shannon, and his eyes got big. I looked too, and I swear I saw a looming shape in the woods. The counselor ran off. Shannon watched him go while I peered at the mark on her scarred wrist. Was that an old skull tattoo? Was she really Winnie? She caught me staring and asked, "So, you think you'll send your kids here?" I considered it. She ran a tight ship. The kids were disciplined and flourishing. But they were also convinced their director killed her cousin to steal her identity and had a monstrous enforcer that helped her keep the peace. So that was definitely a downside. I'm not so sure you can scare someone straight or terrify them into being a better person. I think the more paranoid you get, the worse your decisions are. So no, I wasn't gonna send my kids here. But I didn't tell Shannon that. Nah, I lied through my teeth and I told her they'd love it. Then I said goodbye and hurried back to camp. The whole way out of the woods, I got this feeling that someone was following me. I kept hearing crunches in the leaves and whispers in the trees. But like every poor sucker in every good camp horror story, I told myself, it's just the wind. Run Fool is a production of Ballen Studios, Campside Media, and At Will Media. It is hosted and executive produced by me, Rodney Barnes. This episode was written by Amin Osman and produced by Abakar Adan and Lee Mengistu. Editing by Abakar Adan. Sound director, designer, and mixer is Kevin Seaman. Creature vocalization by Terry Cashburn and artwork by Jessica Clarkston-Kiner. Production support by Jeremy Bone and Cole Lacasio. Special thanks to our operations team, Doug Slaywin, Ashley Warren, Sabina Mara, and Destiny Dingle. Executive producers at Ballen Studios are MrBallen, Nick Witters, and Zach Levitt. Executive producers at Will Media are Will Malnati and Rosie Guerin. Executive producers at Campside Media are Matt Scher, Josh Dean, Vanessa Gregoriadis, and Adam Hoff. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.